joined today by Marc Sinatra, who is the biotech analyst for Corporate Connect. He's recently written a research report on Antisense Therapeutics. Marc, you've been in the industry for many years. What attracted you to Antisense?
Listen, I sort of have a prism that I look through these things at, and the prism is basically, twofold. It's, do they have a program that I think that the company can take through to market or through to a value inflection point, as the industry may be, which is a licensing deal or a trade sale. And once you tick that box, a project doesn't move itself through development. You have to have the right people to do that and the right board to do that. And we're not in an area where just anybody can do that. You've got to have fairly specific and experience. And the Antisense team and the Antisense board has that experience. They've previously dealt very closely with Teva, so that tells you they can deal with big pharma. They also have, and this is really important for a board of a biotech, because they tend to be small companies. They also have a board where the chief scientific officer or the chief executive officer can ring one of the board members up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I've got this problem, I need an answer to it, and get an answer in 5 minutes that would normally take them, days to, and multiple thousands of dollars through consultants to get an answer to. And that's really the crux of it. Those two things, and then I'm willing to dig deeper.
Marc, you recently released a research report via Corporate Connect. You put a valuation on Antisense of 30.5 cents versus a market price of around 11, 12 cents. How do you get to that valuation?
That's a good question, Tim, and it is actually a complex question. You do a whole range of things. The stock standard method for valuing biotechnology companies is a thing called a probability adjusted discounted cash flow analysis, which basically means you sum up all the monies that you think the product can generate, and then you multiply it by what you think is the product's chances of success are, and that gives you a number at the end. Now, there's a number of crucial inputs that go into that valuation, things like discount rate, which determines how fast those monies sort of decline as you bring them forward. Most pharmas will use a discount rate of 10, 11, 12%. They have a lot more information at their fingertips than I do. So to adjust for that, I bump up the discount rate to 15%. I sort of then, I tend to keep other things in the general things like exchange rates, pretty flat. If it's too low, I'll move them up to something that's more like parity. But when you're really getting into the nuts of and the bolts of it, I've got, over years, I've developed generalized sales curves depending on the nature of the product that I'll plug into it. We've got R&D tax rebates that you've got to take account of, and those sorts of things. One of the things that really makes the big difference, though, in all of this is the probability of success you give to a product, because that's literally multiplied by the value that it's going to generate. And if you're looking at generalized terms, and the literature that people have nutted out on this, you'll find a product that's starting in phase, a pharmaceutical specifically that's starting in phase 2 will have starting in phase 1 will have a 5 to 10% chance of getting through to the market. You get to phase 2, it's 40%. You get to phase 3, and it's 60%. So those numbers have quite a big impact on what your final number is. And I think the number I've used off the top of my head for Antisense is about 20%, which would I think most people would probably consider that to be a bit high, given the sheer number of patients that have been tested, being 9. But when you look through the data that sits behind that number, all the data points in the direction of the drug working. So I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm also quite comfortable that that percentage is going to move up as we go forward.
Mark, shareholders always want to see a higher valuation, particularly from an analyst report. What are the key drivers for Antisense to potentially raise that valuation?
Okay, that's a good question. I think one of the things that shareholders often forget is that you don't get value for things you're going to do. You might get some of it, but you get value for things you're going to do when you do them. That's really when it hits the number sheet. So right now, the big thing that we're looking at is probably going to be what the final clinical trial is going to look like for their pivotal study. I would like to see, and I think the company would also like to see, the ability for them to use a higher dose in the next trial. The dose they used in the last trial was 25 milligrams. To give you an example, they did a previous trial that showed no issues with safety. This was in adults, but they used 200 milligrams. So there does appear to be quite a room for them to lift up that dosage. And in general, the higher the dose, the better you expect the clinical response to be. So that will be something that I'm watching quite closely. What does that trial design look like? And that's really my job as an analyst, is to go through those nuts and bolts for people out there, because most people just don't have time to look at those sorts of things. The other thing that would be really nice to see fleshed out that will add value is, we know the indication they're going at for now. It's a very insidious disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Children start to waste, their muscles start to waste at the age of between 3 and 5, and they're dead by the time they're in their late teens to early 20s, wheelchair bound at the age of 11. So getting that drug and having that drug approved to treat such an insidious disease would be great. But from an analyst point of view, you're always looking for, well, what's the next revenue driver? What's the thing that's going to lift the profits even further? And that's going to be the targets, the indications they choose to go after next. We know that they are looking at other muscular dystrophies, and that makes perfect sense. But we're also likely to find out, given the nature of the molecule that their drug targets, that there are lots of other diseases that this particular molecule plays a role in. For example, if you went back 10 years ago and said there was a link between this molecule in multiple sclerosis and this molecule in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, most people would have laughed at you. And I'm certain that over the next 12 months, 24 months, we're going to find that this protein really plays a pretty big role in the disease of inflammation. And inflammation is one of the hot topics in science and medicine and treating diseases, as we're finding out that while inflammation is part of the immune reaction, and it's what helps us, keeps us healthy, it can also go haywire and make us quite sick. I'll just throw in on that just to be topical. It's not the SARS-CoV-2 virus or COVID-19 so much that is killing patients during the pandemic. It's actually an overreaction by the immune system that is causing them to die. That's how integral the immune system can be in these diseases. So to answer the question, in short, we want to see what the clinical trial looks like, and we want to see what other specific diseases are they gonna target next. It's very hard to put a general disease into a DCF model. You really have to have something specific to plug in there. Otherwise, your numbers just don't make any sense.
Thanks, Mark. Always good to talk to you.
Always good to talk to you too, Tim.